Hello and welcome to BAAS 3020, Fundamentals of Inquiry and Discovery. In this first lecture, I'm going to talk about an introduction to the course at a high level and also the first module that we'll begin working on. In this class, what we're really trying to do, BAAS 3020 is the Fundamentals of Inquiry and Discovery, is to provide an introduction to the concepts and techniques used to develop good questions and to structure an appropriate information gathering and analysis to answer the questions. This may seem rather simple, but it isn't a simple thing, and it is a really profound and useful skill that will make you much more valuable in any work situation that you're in. Most people think that they can ask good questions. Most people have answers to questions quickly without doing the research. And so hopefully this course will give you some perspective about what it means to step back from an issue or decision that you're trying to make or a challenge that you're trying to meet and figure out the types of questions you want to ask, the focus of questions you want to ask, how you want to gather the data, how you want to analyze the data, and then make some kind of theories or decisions based upon that. And the better you are at that, the more valuable you will be to any job, etc. Because what happens, and what you're seeing in this yellow box, is the thing that get in our way. And because these things really help us in a huge way in a day-to-day basis, we tend to pull these out of our toolkit first instead of pulling out a more methodical process. So a lot of us have we have assumptions. Most of our assumptions are pretty good because they're based on our own experiences. For example, if we're walking by the stove and the top is glowing red, we assume that we shouldn't touch it. That's a good assumption. I can make an easy decision based upon that, etc. This kind of falls into the gut as well. The gut is based upon my past experience, my knowledge, kind of the wealth of things that I have. But it may not address some of the assumptions I'm making about that data. Maybe it's relevant to a different audience, etc. The emotional connection I have to an issue or topic may influence my ability to ask good questions or to even analyze the data correctly. And really what we're trying to do is to move away from ready, fire, aim into ready, aim, fire. And this is what happens when we just move quickly into answering questions, into making decisions without some thoughtful attention given to the process of gathering data, asking questions, processing that data, analyzing it, formatting it, etc., and then making a decision. So I think this course it's a great high-level course, but I think it's a really practical course for really looking at how you think about things, make better decisions, and really just interact with other people as well, especially in this highly polarized time that we seem to find ourselves in. And also with the fact that we're inundated with data and information through social media in general, and technology. So, this course can hopefully give you some good perspectives on all of that. About me, my name is Michael Bailey, which I didn't put on here. I graduated from Syracuse University with a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering. I immediately went into an MBA program at Syracuse and was a graduate assistant, a teaching assistant, and so I was actually teaching some freshman level courses. So that was my first professor role, and I really quite enjoyed it. When I left Syracuse University, I went and worked in industry and spent about 20 years in industry. I've worked in business, corporate businesses. I've worked in government organizations and in nonprofits. My first role was with a Texas-based company called Electronic Data Systems, or EDS, where I started as a programmer and really quickly moved into the business side of the house, focusing on business strategy, training, global issues. I was the director of training for non-US employees, and then doing some business consulting, business and strategy consulting, and some communications. So I've had a lot of different hats. After 10 years at EDS, EDS actually put me on loan to a nonprofit group working in Dallas to alleviate poverty and relative related challenges. There I was kind of the strategy consultant for over 35 different organizations that were from all the sectors, business, government, and nonprofit. Um, when I left that kind of nonprofit, I worked in the nonprofit sector for about 6 or 7 years, and I was moving back into the corporate sector, the business sector, the industry sector, or trying to find work there. I really kind of, by fluke, came upon an opportunity in Munich, Germany, and I became the marketing and training director for European Computer Telecoms based out of Munich, Germany. And that was a great experience. I'd always wanted, although I'd done global jobs, I had never been based out of the US. And so for several years, I lived and worked in Munich, Germany, and that has made a huge shift in my life. To the point that when I came back to the US, after that job, I really wanted a better work-life balance, which is really prevalent in Germany. Every job, including McDonald's, has a 30 days of vacation a year required. And so I decided to go into teaching, specifically at the collegiate level. I went back and completed my master's in both philosophy and mathematics. And philosophy and mathematics really are heavily related to this course, conceptually. Asking good questions, using data are really the foundational pieces of philosophy. How do I think really well? On a personal note, I have a couple sons. I'm an avid traveler, another reason I wanted to be a professor. And my favorite way of traveling is actually on foot. And I've logged over 2,000 miles of hiking across Europe over the past few years, often hiking for at least a month. And one time I even hiked for 2 months straight. So I'm excited for this course. I really teach from a perspective of context and value. I do believe, having 20 years history in industry, that I can speak to you about the value of some knowledge and skills that you can bring to the table. And certainly figuring out how to analyze something from the start. What are the questions we want to gather, the information we want to gather? How do we analyze that? How do we make sure we have good sources? All of that just makes you a better employee, makes you more valuable. And when you're more valuable, your paycheck gets bigger. All right, about the course, just a couple of things. You can read all about this in Canvas, but a couple of things. The way I designed the course, if it's a 16-week course, Module 1 assignments are due on the Monday of Module 2. If it's an 8-week course, I still leave the modules as 16 modules because I think when you see a double module, it's overwhelming to try to figure that all out. So the odd modules are due on Thursdays. So for example, Module 1 and Module 3 is due on Thursday of that week. All of your assignments have due dates in them, so you'll be able to see that, but this is just a general. And then the even modules are due on Saturday of that week. So Module 1 is due on Thursday of week 1. Module 2 would be due on Saturday of week 1. And then in these shorter periods, I give a 2-day grace period. So if you haven't finished all of Module 1 by Thursday, you have until Saturday to get those assignments in. And if you haven't finished Module 2 assignments by Saturday, you have until Monday to get those in. The one difference in this course would be about the discussion pieces. You really need to meet the deadlines for handling discussions within your specific group. There's loads of reading and content in this course. It's very important for you to read and take notes on all content, whether you print things off and have a notebook. I personally believe it's better. I know it's better for me, and I generally think this is a good rule, that writing things down helps with the recall and the retention of information. They say the more senses you use, the greater your retention. If you just hear something, you retain 20%. If you hear it and see it, you retain 40%, etc., along those lines. I suggest strongly that you label any notes that you take with the module number that they're from, specifically because each week there are multiple choice quizzes that are relative just to the content and the reading that you're doing for that week. And I try to have at least a question about every major content piece. And so it's really important for you, before you take those quizzes, that you've done all the reading and taken your notes, so you're relatively familiar with the material, etc. On the quizzes, you may use your notes, you may use the text, etc., but the quizzes are timed. It's a simple multiple choice question, based upon each content area. But you only have 3 or 4 minutes per question to answer it, so you don't have time to go back and find all those answers in all of the material. So it's very important that you read the content before the quizzes are due. All right, so again, your quizzes would be due on the Thursday or Saturday of the week if you have a short course, and on the Monday of the following week for a normal semester course. So I'm always updating courses. I'm moving things around. A lot of it's based on student feedback. The last quiz of the course will be actually asking you to tell me what worked, what didn't, and what's missing. And so I use that data. I use the feedback from students at the end of the course to really kind of improve the course each time. And so when I'm moving things around in Canvas, the links are different or the references are different. This article in Module 7 is now in Module 6. So if you find any of those things or you find any typos, please let me know. And I'm very gracious and offer a couple points, extra credit points, for your helping me try to keep the course as accurate as possible. Okay, so let's look at Module 1. This course will challenge you to consider what you want to know and why you want to know it. And together these things make up what we call curiosity. We're also going to learn how you know what you know. And then maybe most importantly, I don't know if it's most important or not, but the importance of making or of using a systematic process when seeking answers and making decisions. Of course, this is really dependent upon the importance of the decision that you're making or the role that you're in, etc. But knowing how to use a systematic process, a great example of this is surveys. Everyone thinks it's so easy to survey people, but creating good surveys that get good data is not as simple as it sounds. And take that from a marketing guy and a business analytic guy. In our professional and personal lives, basing our decisions and solving problems through the use of systematic observations, as opposed to basing decisions solely on how you solved a problem in the past or your past experiences, will provide a deeper understanding of the problem and more sustainable solutions. Also, solutions that have less errors probably inherent in them and less need for revision. Thus, we will consider not only how do we know what we know, but also how can the inquiry process help us to acquire a better picture of reality and provide methods to understand and solve problems. Our reading for this week is pretty short. It's out of the book, 100 Questions and Answers About Research Method. This is a great book. It's really light. You're doing just a couple questions, and each question is a page or two. So why do we use this? So in an increasingly data-driven world, it is more important than ever for professionals to better understand the process of research from the initial asking of questions through the analysis and interpretation of data leading to final reports and our decision makings. This is directly from the book, and it really just goes with what I've already said about why this class is valuable, etc. And another thing you might think about is right now, and we hear all this about fake news, which really I think applies largely, or at least the way I hear it, is about media and what we're hearing, etc. And really it's just throwing mud from one side to the other. But when you have open sources like Wikipedia, Facebook, Instagram, you have lots of people that are um, producing information and sharing information that may or may not be true. And so there's a plethora of fake news. There's always been fake news around and people trying to influence one another. But with technology and the social media and the access to media that we all have in our phones and technology, this is just multiplied by a million. So, understanding research, understanding more empirical methods, scientific methods is really important. So let's look at some of those questions. Why is research necessary and what are some of the benefits? Well, we've already kind of touched on this in several ways, and again, you're going to read through this. But really cutting through the BS and even our own BS. We have a lot of assumptions. We have a lot of history and background, no matter how old we are. And social media reinforces our beliefs because we're not seeing opposing views, or if we are, we get in a emotional discourse instead of an intellectual or rational discourse. What is the process for selecting a research topic, and do I need to be an experienced researcher to choose? No, you are an experienced researcher. Have you ever Googled anything? Of course you have. So that's kind of like the basic idea of research is, I go out and find out some information. But when I want to get into more detail, then I want to go into it deeper and figure out the different types of methodology, etc. So, hopefully through this course, you're going to get some more experience and learn to be a more skilled researcher than a Googler, which we all are. What is the scientific method? You may remember this from elementary school or middle school. And really, it's just, it's where the philosophy comes in. The scientific method really was capitulated by Aristotle, the father of Western philosophy. And his basic premise was that when you're making a decision, you should make that decision largely based on reasoning or rational thought. Now, I don't know that that's completely true, but you don't want to be totally led by emotions. My godmother used to always say that emotions are great guides, but horrible masters. So emotions do provide input and data to what you're deciding, but they should not be the master. They should not be the only thing you're looking at. And that's what we're really talking about here is how do we provide rationality and emotionality in concert together, okay? What are the different types of research models? There's really kind of basically two, experimental and non-experimental. Experimental is when you create something and you actually manipulate something to change it to see the effects. I don't know, maybe you remove food from a test subject and see if they get angry. Non-experimental is really when you're kind of looking at what has happened, what are people's opinions about it, seeing kind of a historical impact, or, does A always come after B? Is that always true, sometimes true, mostly true? And so those are the non-experimental when you're not, when you're just observing things kind of as they are and trying to make some conclusions from that, some outputs from that. What is the best research model for my purposes? There is no one best model. And I like this question because there probably is a better model for your specific purpose. There isn't one overarching great research model. So you have to think about what you're researching, what is the purpose of your research, what is the decision you're trying to make, and then think about the questions and what model, experimental or non-experimental, will help me get the best data to make a decision, or maybe to just influence other people. What is the difference between basic and applied research? Basic research is the kind of the Googling we do. It's something we're doing, and that's not always true. Sometimes we are using Google in applied research, but basic research is generally to increase our knowledge, and applied research is to apply that knowledge to make a decision, to do something, to have a solution to a problem, etc. What is qualitative research? And some examples in the book gives a good example of this. Um, Qualitative is kind of like that non-experimental methodology where you're doing more observation, and seeing how things are related to each other and what's happening, versus quantitative where you're trying to look at numbers, etc. So the reading is very simple. These aren't 7 chapters. These are 7 questions that you just saw here. I talked a little bit about them, but you really want to read them. Again, they're only a page or 2. This is a great book for this course because it's so simple and direct. So this is the actual reading that you're required to do. It may be confusing because of the last slide, but as I was beginning to teach this course, I was sent the wrong book and didn't realize it till after I had started reading it. And I liked it, and I felt it was a nice complement to this course. In fact, most of you have probably already seen that book and used it in your prior class. So let's look at our required text reading from this module, 100 Questions and Answers About Survey Research by Aaron Rule. Very similar to the other book. It's a great book because it's nice in bite-sized pieces, questions, answers, a page or 2. And why do we want this? Well, your project in this class is really about applying the research model that you learned in the prior class. And specifically, we're doing a survey project for this class. So this is very, very relevant. The other thing is that surveys are ubiquitous. We see them all the time. Even now when you watch the evening news, they're asking you to get out your phone and vote, on one side or the other. But the problem with this is it makes them seem easy to create. And this really isn't true, not for a true survey, a true research survey or survey research. So we're looking at questions 1 through 7, which is all of part 1, understanding what surveys are and how they're used. What is a survey? Survey is just a tool to collect data on a large group of people to answer one or more research questions. It's one of the most common research devices. When we think of survey, we often think of the tool or the instrument that we fill out, but that's just really one part of that. To conduct a high quality survey, we need to carefully plan the survey design, to answer the question or questions that we want to answer, figure out how we're going to administer it, make sure that the questions are measurable, that they're answering the question that we have, etc. How are surveys used? They're used in a lot of different ways, okay? The government uses surveys for basic research and to see how their programs are working. The census, the U.S. Census, is a kind of survey that determines how much money and funds and services will be allocated in different areas, geographic areas. Social scientists use surveys for basic or applied research. They use surveys to answer specific research questions, such as who voted in a given election. That would be a basic research question. An applied research question would be designed with a specific outcome in mind. For example, a survey to answer the question, what are the needs of homeless and runaway youth in Atlanta? Corporations use surveys all the time to see how customers are satisfied with their product. And we see this now in some sense when you're rating something like on Amazon, you are in essence filling out a survey, which is very useful to other consumers. What are the benefits of doing a survey? Surveys have a lot of great properties that make them ideal to answer almost any type of research question, assuming you do the design well. They're versatile, they're really cost effective, it's not very expensive to do this, and they're also generalizable. There are a lot of repositories that have survey data in them, so it can already be helpful in that way. You might not have to create your own survey. They're efficient in terms of time and resources, and like we said, that you can apply them to almost anything. What is the survey research process from beginning to end? The process starts by having a question. You have some knowledge that you want to see, some question you want answered, and then you do some background research on it. So you have a question in your mind already, but then you do research in that area or the concept. And then based upon that research, you're going to try to see if you want to modify the question a little bit, make sure that the question is answerable and that the answers are measurable. And then you want to think about the survey design. What's the best design? Who are the people that you want to answer? What's the audience? Then creating the actual instrument. How are you going to collect the data? Once you've done that, and how are you going to get the people to take it? Recruiting people, collecting the actual data, and then analyzing it and reporting on it. How are good empirical questions developed? This is specifically about empirical questions. So how can we have good empirical questions? Research question is one that can be answered by collecting empirical observations, such as answers to a survey, which can be analyzed. The results of the analysis will answer the research question. A question that focuses on beliefs or ideologies often cannot be answered using social science methods because we cannot collect observations about things that are not empirical, meaning observations about the real world. Exploratory questions are not good questions for survey research. Exploratory questions ask about meanings, rituals, experience. We often want to get at these things in people's own words and definitions. Qualitative research is better for this. A good research question is one that has been carefully thought out and precisely stated. We continue to revise the research question, and the concepts we wish to analyze are concrete and observable. So like it starts out, the idea here, the example they use is a very vague question, is how do people get ahead in life? And as going through that, some people may think of getting ahead in life is just finishing school and getting a job they love. Some people may think getting ahead in life is having $1 million. Some people may think it's owning a home. So it's just too broad. And so, you have to keep refining that until you get to something that is observable and measurable. And so like the last thing is, maybe it's about buying a home. Okay. What are the various types of survey design? The typical survey design is the cross-sectional design. Researchers use a cross-sectional design surveying people at a single point in time. How old were you when you first bought your home? I think is what they said. If we're interested in change over time, you can select a longitudinal design. There are two types. The first is a panel design in which the same people are surveyed multiple times, and the second is a time series or a trend design where different people, you're looking at different things over time. So it's kind of like two cross-sectional designs at different periods that are closely related. And the last question, how do we choose the right survey design? There are three broad categories of research questions used: descriptive, explanatory, and evaluative. Descriptive questions are the ones that ask how much of X is out there. For example, it might be, what is the prevalence of diabetes in the US in 2018? Explanatory questions are those that ask about the relationships between two or more variables. For example, we might ask, does obesity cause diabetes? Or does living in disadvantaged neighborhoods increase the probability of diabetes? So you're looking at multiple things connected together. Evaluative questions are a special form of an explanatory question that are used specifically to evaluate causally. Did something cause something else? Social programs or interventions. Is this program effective? Will a program of exercise combined with nutrition lower the risk of diabetes, etc.? So I think that gives you a good start on understanding what surveys are and how they're used, and we'll be going in much more depth. Another piece of information this week is we have several glossaries of detailed information. I'm not going to go through this one. This is in your content part of Canvas. These are very short definitions. They're very clear. They have good examples. So just make sure that you are going through this and writing it down, printing it off and highlighting. That's also another good one. if you can print, I would suggest you do it, because then it's probably easier for you when you're taking the quizzes and looking through material. Another section in the content is what is the process of inquiry. There's a great little video about, short video about curiosity. And a quick reminder here about what we are trying to accomplish in this course. Every person who considers themselves to be educated should know how to work with information to affect decision making. So, you're a good ways through your college career. You really should understand how to create a process for analyzing and making good decisions. The more responsibility you have, it tends to mean the more decisions you have to make. But being able to really think through problems in a thoughtful, rational way, using data that's found or created in your own questions and surveys, will make you very valuable to any organization you're in. Organizations reward smart people, and smart people understand how to make good decisions, not at the gut level, but in a thoughtful, rational process. Sometimes you have to do gut, but you should know how to do this more involved, intentional process of inquiry. So this sheet, I think this was done by the dean of the School of BAAS, Bachelor's of Arts and Applied Sciences, and I think it does a great job of walking through this kind of idea of inquiry. And these are the topics that you'll read about, and she gives great examples, Dr. Shattuck. What is curiosity? What is the scientific method? The purpose of the course. Oh, this is a great section on how do we know what is real. It's a really good one. Looking at causal reasoning. So many people think because two things are connected that one causes the other, and that is not necessarily true. Probabilistic reasoning. The errors, make sure you pay special attention to that. That's a good eye-opener for the kind of errors we make when we're doing inquiry. There's another great one, agreement, reality, tradition, and authority, how our culture impacts, how we see things, how we decide things, how we jump to conclusions, looking for reality, the types of structured inquiry, etc. And then, of course, what inquiry focuses on. So I'm going to tell you a quick funny story, and I know I've gone a little bit long, but we're almost done here. And it's a tale of turkey tails. So the story starts, and this young woman is cooking Thanksgiving dinner for her extended family for the first time. Now she's helped her mom before, and while she's cooking, her husband is looking on, and as she's about to prepare the turkey, she cuts off the tail to the turkey before she puts it in the oven and discards the tail. And her husband asks her, "Why do you cut off the tail?" And the woman goes, "Well, that's what you do when you cook a turkey. You always cut off the tail before you put it in the pan." A little while later, the lady's mother shows up, and she realizes she didn't really know why they cut off the tail. And so she asks her mother, "Why do we cut off the tail for the turkey?" And her mother gives her the exact same response that she gave to her husband, which is that, we always cut the tail off before you put it in the pan and cook it. And then the grandmother arrives, and the mother and daughter are kind of chuckling about this, and then ask the grandmother, "Why do we always have to cut the tail off the turkey?" And the grandmother just shakes her head and says, "Well, you don't if you have a pan big enough, but my pan was never big enough for it to fit in there." And I think this is a great little metaphor or story about how we often make decisions and do things without understanding the implications, without understanding the history, etc. And so doing a kind of inquiry, which we just saw there, a very simple Thanksgiving Day inquiry, made these three generations kind of understand what was going on and why some things were being done, instead of just doing them because we've always done it that way. There's a great section on looking at the inquiry approaches, quantitative, qualitative, and the mixed methods. Quantitative, being more numerical, data-driven, hard data-driven, numbers, measurements, control, experimentation, gathering information in a systemic way. Whereas qualitative is really more non-numerical research that emphasizes observations, stories or narratives, personal opinions, and interpretations. For example, a qualitative inquiry might be a focus group, asking people, what is their favorite X, Y, or Z. Of course, there's often a quantitative a piece of that, right? Because you're recording numbers or responses, etc. So these aren't necessarily very completely distinct. They aren't black and white, etc. They are gray areas, and that's the idea of the mixed method as well. There's a final glossary on inquiry terminology. I'm not going to go through this, but again, they're good definitions. There's good simplification of it, and in many of them, there's great examples. So take your time, print it off, get your highlighter out, and go through this. Okay. Finally, when you're getting into the part, we're going to talk about how you do discussions, and each of you will be in a discussion group with several of your classmates. During 1 week, you will lead the discussion, and the rest of the weeks you will be a participant in that. You will be graded as a leader for that 1 week. You'll get that 1 grade for discussion leadership, and then each week you'll get a grade for participation in there. But as you're going in there, there's a great article. I loved this article that Dr. Shattuck found again about how do we return to civil discourse? When we have really emotional issues, when we have really strong disagreements, how can we come together and discuss them in a civil way, in a non-defensive, non-argumentative way, to learn about each other, to learn about the other side, and maybe come to some kind of compromise? And if there's anything we need in the world right now, it's really a greater sense of civil discourse, in my opinion. When you use things like Facebook, etc., we see that all the time, how people are unfriending people because they have a difference of opinion. And, really the way we come together and the way we create compromise is understanding, the hows and whys that people got to their opinions. And so this article is not very long. It's a great article. Do not